good afternoon, everybody. It's so great to join this wonderful group, and I could not be more thrilled to be up here with three incredible CEOs and founders whom I've either known for a while and admire, or whom I'm excited to get to know better through this panel. But what we're hoping to do this afternoon is to take a couple of these lunchtime plenaries and tie them together through this discussion on AI and on energy. And so, I'm thinking a lot about these questions that are in front of us, and I see policymakers in the audience, I see small business owners, obviously our wonderful friends at Zions Bank, our capital providers, and we're all thinking the same thing, which is, it's not whether energy demand is coming, we know it's coming, but it's how we actually build the capacity to meet it, and how can Utah lead in this moment. Today, data equals megawatts. We know that data centers and AI workloads are driving significant growth, and that trend is only accelerating. But this is something that I want to make really clear, and that's that AI does not exist in the cloud, it exists in the real world. We need materials, we need manufacturing, we need power systems, and ultimately these things will determine whether or not projects can move from idea to commissioning. We're also here at a trade conference, right? So there's a bigger question, and it's a strategic question at play, and that's on something that my friend Ben Colliner brought to my attention, which is a US initiative around exporting AI. So for the US to win and compete globally, exporting AI doesn't just mean exporting our models, it means exporting the full stack: computation, infrastructure, energy, and the supply chains that make those models possible. So we've got an amazing panel to talk about that. I want to introduce my panelists here. Immediately to my left is Nate Walkingshaw with Torus, the CEO and founder of a Utah-based energy technology company focused on advancing energy storage and localized power systems. Next to him, I have Andre Zeitoun, Ionic Mineral Technologies. Andre is also the founder and CEO, and this company is at the very front end of the energy and technology supply chain. They're working in the critical mineral space. And then finally, Chris Hayter with High-Tech Solutions. He is a co-founder and president of High-Tech Solutions, a company deeply involved in building the advanced energy ecosystem with a particular focus on nuclear and firm power. So without further ado, let's get into a couple of questions. And why don't we start at the top, we'll work our way down. We'll start with critical minerals. And I want to ask, where is capacity the most constrained right now, and what would unstick it the fastest? So Andre, let's start with you. What is the single biggest bottleneck between resource and qualified, financeable, bankable supply? Is it permitting, processing, offtake, qualification, or capital?
It's hard to put one answer to that question. It's really all of it. They all go together. Between having the resource, you need to also have the bankability, the feasibility of that, and that's really what gets the confidence. And then from there, you need offtake agreements, and with all that together, then the financing comes. And so they all kind of work together, hand in hand. It's hard to kind of just put in a single one thing that's going to cause it. It's really it's that, but also I think it's market structure. And I feel like this is something that this administration is really working on, which is to kind of create a non-Chinese market for a lot of these materials, where there's discussions about price floors. There's Project Vault for $12 billion to be able to purchase materials. But the biggest risk, at least in our sector, in mining, has always been really the risk of Chinese dumping. Right, as soon as a project gets funded, these take sometimes up to 10 years, and then just in time for first production comes a price dump. And so it's really, all of these things really need to be fixed to be able to kind of establish a secure supply chain.
Great, thanks for that. Nate, you guys are building amazing things here in the United States. Grid storage, grid scale. What is the biggest limiter to deploying reliability at scale, which is becoming a bigger and bigger topic in the energy space? And a couple of things that we think about. We're in similar businesses: interconnection, hardware, utility programs, or project
Yeah, I mean, probably it is all of it, but I think some of the main, and for those of you who don't understand like where Torus is located, if you have main transmission, sub-transmission distribution, all of our products are installed in sub-transmission distribution, really close to the load. And so the goal of our product is to remove congestion so that electrons can get to the load. And so really the things that inhibit our ability to get there actually is permit reform. There's two nonlinear processes for us that don't allow us to deploy Torus stations as fast as we possibly can, and it really is moving from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It's frustrating because we basically have a standard bill of materials with a standard configuration, and they're all meeting national grid standards, whether it's 2030.5 or IEEE 1547. It can all get installed, but depending on the local AHJ authority having jurisdiction, or the fire marshal in that town, we could wait 3 months, or we could get one in 2 days. And it is really, really hard to create predictability around construction projects on a week-over-week or a monthly forecast to get there.
And sorry, I think my peripheral vision was off. I introduced these gentlemen in the wrong order, so sorry about that. But Chris, for advanced firm power like nuclear, what is the gating item that determines whether or not this is real this decade? Is it licensing, workforce, supply chain, or utility integration? Or something else?
Well, I wish it was one. The utility integration, I'll start with. When you look across the country at the large nuclear utilities that I would say I wish were leading out maybe more robustly, more open to talking about new technologies, what you're seeing is it's pretty much down to Southern Company and Westinghouse AP1000 currently. And then you have a series of startups and other groups, and then my very close partner, Hayter, who bought a plant Palisades in Michigan to actually decommission, and bravely decided to recommission that plant, and we're putting that back online this summer, and then building out the first 2 SMR 300s. So when I look at the utilities in general, it's a very risky proposition in their minds to go through new technology, expand. Often these are, public companies, and so you've seen some reluctance to let them to lead out rather than let the market play out. From there, supply chain, manufacturing. I wish I could say it was just one, but to some degree, it's all of these and more. But those would be the top 3. So I think you actually nailed it on that. Utility integration, supply chain, and ultimately workforce. Today in nuclear power, over 60% of our workforce today is in retirement age or greater. And here we are looking at a nation potentially building out what we hope would be hundreds of reactors, is what I hope. So when you look at that problem, clearly we have to do something about that, which has been one of the key reasons we have decided to bring our company to Utah. Our company is really, one, to get ahead of the workforce issue, which is costing our industry, even as we speak, we're understaffed everywhere. Every utility is understaffed today on the nuclear portion of their fleets. So if we're going to solve these problems, we have to lead out. It's one of the reasons we've loved being a part of Utah and Operation Gigawatt, and governors lead on that. So there's a lot of complexities. Last but not least, we'll talk about manufacturing, which is why in our proposal in MOU with the state, between Holtec, Hayter, Fulcrum, and the state of Utah, was to drive manufacturing right here to our backyard. As I think Torus and other companies have led on that. How do we ensure that we can build more than a trinket 1 or 2 reactors? Well, we build out the manufacturing power and the manufacturing prowess right here in our backyard.
I have a couple of thoughts too. I mean, the state of Utah has done a fantastic job here. We wrote legislation, Senate Bill 132, to allow anything over 100 megawatts, basically to to be designed, engineered, and installed to run a data center campus completely on its own. Like, it is nation-leading legislation for us to be able to do that. On the flip side of that, so Torus, we started in Springville, Utah 5 years ago, 8,000 square feet. Moved to South Salt Lake 2 years ago, 50,000 square feet. Then moved to Salt Lake City, Utah at 600,000 square feet of manufacturing. And this is, all about bringing U.S. manufacturing back. And then you have to advance that U.S.-based manufacturing against a nation state. So you have to improve it and make it even better. So that means that you have to have people skilled enough coming out of trade schools, or you have to have a program within your business that takes someone with no technical skills and then train them into new and emerging technology, like an automated production, which is what we do today. So Utah, I mean, it is amazing, you guys. What we have done is we have an innovative utility and innovative legislation for getting energy on the grid. And then our part of this is to build a campus that really takes anyone from, kind of a individual contributor that has never done this work to someone who's very advanced EE, and teach that technical skill set all the way through, our employee base. We, as Americans, we are really good at doing this. We kind of lost our way of doing this really, really well, but man, I feel like the state of Utah right now is doing a great job at being able to be a model citizen here for them.
Cool. Thank you for reminding us of that. I do feel like Utah continues to be such an amazing operating environment. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about how you're all deploying it right now. How do these systems actually come online, and what does the last mile look like from a timeline standpoint? So we kind of think about things in 4 steps, right? Approvals, financing, supply chain, and then commissioning and operations. And there's execution risk along every single one of those steps. Where do projects, what keeps each one of you up as a CEO at night on those 4 steps?
I would say that the thing that keeps me up at night really more is just timing. I don't know, I'm sure you guys are probably not much different, but we always want to do things faster, quicker, address the needs that are, being presented, by national security, customers, whatever it may be, as quickly as possible, and to try to force multiply as much as we can. And I think that, AI has been an incredible force multiplier. I've been loving this conference and these discussions about, AI and how to use AI. And I can say that, the things that we're doing things right now that I think that without AI would have taken us maybe 3 years to be able to do, the ability to see large, complex sets of data, right, in an instant, right, being able to, so that starts from, developing a deposit, looking at all your assays, looking at trying to understand, the genesis and formation of a deposit so that you can be more efficient as far as how to drill it, how to mine it, putting your mine plans together, and all while simultaneously developing novel processes around how do we extract it, based on this, and the ability of AI to be able to kind of help us fast track these types of large complex businesses has been amazing. But I'm not really answering your question about what keeps me up at night. I actually sleep pretty well, but it's still, even with AI, I want to get it done faster. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've probably lots of thoughts here, and I won't take up too much time. But if you look at existing utility infrastructure, this is a different point of view, probably a contrarian point of view. But I feel like we don't necessarily have a generation issue; we have a capacity problem. At least that's what we focus on. So if you think about the way the national utility or the national grid is built, and I'll use Duke Energy as an example. The national utility is built for essentially 100 hours a year or 1% of peak load. So just imagine Duke Energy runs about 18 gigawatts of base load, but 1% or 100 hours a year has to flex all the way to 58 gigawatts. So the distance, the flexibility between here and here, their main transmission system runs at 55% capacity factor. But the issue is, you guys, is that we can't get power to load, and it's because of congestion. And so if you can remove congestion, you can free up capacity and you can say yes to more projects. But that happens down at the sub-transmission distribution layers because that's where load is. The bulk transmission system gets congested as well, and you need to pull off congestion there. So the things that keep us up at night is being able to tell this story and educate to get as much of these assets installed to existing interconnection as possible so that we can clear the lines to get the stuff that both of them are doing to data centers. And so you have to have both of those things happening all at the same time to get this to work.
Nate's product allows us to build the cathedral for Easter and get every pew filled every Sunday. Cool. How about you, Chris?
I wish I was a good sleeper. The challenges from energy deployment to take nuclear power, nat gas, any of the different generation types has similarities, but with nuclear we have added layer. So when we look at this problem, we have regulatory licensing that is in excess. And by the way, I'm not here to complain about that. My company, since it was founded initially in 2003 until today, have worked inside that environment. We've thrived inside that environment, disrupted some huge sectors of that. So I'm not here to say NRC bad, DOE good, or any of that. We thrive regardless. Nuclear power isn't necessarily slow. It's more that we are working in places that have never done this before. So there is an educational portion. A lot of people fear nuclear power, and oftentimes fear is based in lack of knowledge or ignorance or whatever you want to call it. So we have to, and again, I will give props to the state and its leadership and its desire to bring in this, what is new technology to the state of Utah in building out nuclear reactors, is education. We need to educate. We need to let people know that not only can nuclear power provide amazing jobs, true, generational jobs. We can get 80 to 100 years of life out of a power plant. That's unheard of, except the nuclear power. So obviously I love power generation. I love coal plants. I love nat gas. I love battery backup, and I love thermal, and I love minerals, because without minerals we wouldn't have fuel. So the questions that keep me up at night is, how do we tie all of us in together and catalyze this industry of both energy development, but specifically, in my part of it, nuclear energy development? How do we ensure we have this fuel supplies? How do we properly vet who can get to the market the quickest? And that's what, when we came to Utah, we said, hey, we're gonna bring our decades of experience. Who gets to market first? Because that matters. Who can build out the infrastructure, workforce, training, the manufacturing, which has been very eloquently stated. We lack most of that manufacturing prowess today. And then add on the nuclear layer to manufacturing, which is nuclear quality assurance 1. So not just any shop who fabricates can go and start building nuclear components. So we have a lot of these things, and so it's what keeps me up at night, and what brought high tech to Utah was we needed a state that looked forward, both from legislative, the executive, and also from the different supporting groups, World Trade Center. EDC Utah, all the governors groups at the GOED, we were so inundated with support to bring our process and our concept to Utah of building out a nuclear ecosystem, of building out the infrastructure it'll take to become more than, we're gonna build a couple of reactors if we're lucky, and we're going to hope that this works. No, what we're going to do is build out the entire infrastructure. And then if you look who I'm sitting next to today, from the very beginning of fuel life cycle, where you're mining uranium or whatever the product may be, to how we provide the necessary backup to what Nate just so eloquently explained to all of us, to ultimately delivering the jobs, the people to fill those jobs, the manufacturing. We've been out in trade missions to South Korea just recently, France, Japan. So we're looking at what can we do to reshore what was once a great manufacturing country into one that's been more, I guess, subdued in its capabilities. And this current administration on the presidential side has been a huge boost to us. So the Department of Energy, the Department of War, all these different groups have interest. And what's so beautiful about this is I'm so glad I'm in Utah. I'm glad I'm a Utahn. My company is moving here, but it's in Washington State, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, the UK, Brazil. So when we bring this all together, it's going to culminate in building out what I believe will be the greatest nuclear infrastructure or energy infrastructure that's ever existed in the United States. Very similar to what happened in Pennsylvania to build out yet Babcock, Wilcox, Westinghouse, the original OEMs of nuclear power. And you saw that Midwest to Northeast powerhouse. We're going to do that in the Mountain West, and most importantly, we get to operating reactors sooner than anyone, but more importantly, not one or two, the fact that we can manufacture 5 a year, that we can start 6 projects instead of starting 1. This is what we're capable of doing here in Utah.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, we are so excited, obviously, about Utah leading out on some of these fronts and planting a flag, saying we want to attract more alternative energies, we want to host AI data centers, we want to get more out of our existing system. But we want to succeed as a country as well. So I would just ask the 3 of you, if you published a 1-page go-live checklist for customers or communities outside of Utah, it sounds like Utah's doing a lot of things right, but let's say inside or outside of Utah, what would your top 3 items on it be?
Can I ask you to just repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, so if you were trying to take some of the things that are working well in Utah and templatize them into other states, as a go-live checklist for customers, for communities, what would those 3 things be?
It's a great question. I want to kind of add to what my panelists have said here. I mean, we couldn't be in a better state for what we're doing. And I feel like the state gets it. There's common sense. They understand what the future looks like and wanting to be at the forefront of innovating and securing that future. And the mission critical initiative, being able to supply 25% plus of the world's critical minerals here in the state, while at the same time hosting some data centers at the same time. They get it, and I just wonder, is it you could write down a 1-pager and give advice to other states, but you can't teach common sense. You have it or you don't, and so but I would boil it down to that really, and from my perspective and my dealings.
A couple of ingredients that I think are just awesome, Theresa. So I think you have to align incentives, and so and I think your kind of call out here around customers is great. But we have to keep the cost of energy low. Like at the end of the day, the basis that we're kind of in the largest race for knowledge and energy. AI infrastructure from CPUs to GPUs. We've seen this movie before, but I think if we're not really thoughtful and methodical about how we get there, kind of the dead bodies along the way are going to be massive. So one, I think you have to align incentives. I think customers have to see a way to save. They're either saving money, saving the world. Hopefully both of those things at the exact same time. 2, legislations. I think legislatively you have to have alignment too. And then I think the third thing is making sure that the commercial sector is got a really good basis to help higher education. I just think about schools right now and the people that are coming out of our schools to go look for jobs. There's a lot of tension right now about what that looks like. And so I think as much as we can align all three of those incentives, private sector, public sector, and education and legislation, and make sure that those incentives do good for the world. I think we have a moral obligation to do it.
Excellent points. I guess mine would, my one pager, I'll start with people, some small businesses. What is nuclear power? What does large baseload mean to small business? Well, there's quite a few studies done on this. For every nuclear worker, you create somewhere, depending on the area, 3 to 7 jobs, whether that can be a fabrication shop, that can be a hotel front desk, individual services, a services job. So when I look at this from a small business and kind of mentally preparing, it's this small business is the same individual. What does a nuclear power plant in our backyards mean? And so when we look at it from the economics, it's exceptional. It'll drive jobs right out of the high school level in nuclear power. In my company, it's about 70% no degree required. It doesn't mean that's the exact breakdown, but it's not required. And then about 30% are degreed positions. So as we build this out and we start, looking at how the average American, how the average Utahn and the small business owner benefits from this, it's new customer base, it's access to the sheer volume of tax revenues that come in, more accessible energy. I'll be the first to say this nuclear power isn't the inexpensive option, right? We know this, it's the long-term solution. It's the one that's challenging, and that would be part of my message to every person in this room who owns a small or medium business, is that nuclear power will benefit you. It will give you a bigger tax base. It will help every town in middle America who has a nuclear power plant is blessed. Good roads, excellent schools, highly supportive population. Again, it's an education thing. So secondarily, legislatively, and what the public leadership can do, I think Utah's doing it. I wouldn't be here if they weren't. I joked with my wife a few years ago, I wish I could bring my company to Utah. And I didn't think it was possible just 4 years ago. And today, I feel welcomed, I feel encouraged. From cities to the state, the support legislatively has been amazing. In communities has been wonderful. So I would say keep doing what you're doing. And then last one, from a capital standpoint, there's a lot of talk of big projects across the country. We've seen some of them falter in Texas and other places. I think what we have to do is look at what the offering is. And what I mean by that is, what does it actually look like? What are we trying to build? Is it just, I'm trying to build X number of megawatts or gigawatts? Is it just this? Or are we trying to build out something greater? We are in a bit of a gold rush right now. We may never experience anything like this again. This is bigger than the internet. This is vastly bigger, because this is what controls means of production. This is what controls the AI race. This is what controls who wins in the little talked about, but blockchain and crypto is not being left out from the Department of War and from national security. These are all things. How do we get a Bitcoin? Well, we mine it. We mine it with some parts and pieces, but ultimately, what's the bottleneck? Energy is the bottleneck for nearly all means of production. And so that would be, I guess, in a roundabout way, capital needs to move. So we need to figure out how to vet projects in a way where we can see that the capital really moves. We get past intents, we get past MOUs. And so I'm not a finance major. I pay people to do that. But having gone through and both trying to raise funds to secure traditional capital, I think we need a holistic approach where we have the federal government, the state government, and most importantly, by far, is the traditional capital, and how, whether it's a bank, whether it's an equity firm, whether it's a family office, we have to figure out how to start working together for different phases of project. Private equity doesn't necessarily fit into a 30-year plan, but it does help us get things started. So we need to figure out how to break these things up more effectively. And so I'm not going to solve that problem by myself, or I don't think these three folks, I think we could come up with great ideas, but it's going to be those people who work in traditional capital, who work in capital in general, who are going to come up with these ways and figure out how to de-risk these projects. And the key word is, are these projects repeatable, right? Or are we just building one to prove we can do it? That's one way of doing it that requires no supply chain, no guarantees. I can understand banks not liking that or capital not liking that. But if we can prove out this is a repeatable process, that we can build these at scale, then hopefully we can get the money moving.
I was going to flip the model. For those of you who don't know our moderator, Theresa's a powerhouse. She works at rPlus, so I know you're asking us the questions, but I would love to know you get to look at this stuff all the time. I'd love to know your point of view.
I think from our vantage point, we need a better marketing program around what the cost of success and failure is. Because I agree completely, we have this economic imperative, we have this security imperative, but it is getting, in some respects, harder and harder to build anything anywhere. And so we need to enlist like our entire citizenry around that this is actually an imperative for our continued success as a country and for our continued ability to live the lifestyles that we all want to live. And so I think it's like messaging. I think a huge part of it is messaging. Yeah, thanks for asking me the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know our time has gone like really quickly. I want to ask maybe one final question to everyone, bringing us around to this strategic question again around exporting the AI stack. And I've found in other panels that I've been a part of, like asking a sort of one thing question can kind of help everyone distill. So I'd like to ask each of our panelists to give a concrete action item that policymakers, small businesses, or capital providers could do, like one thing that would most accelerate more capacity coming online.
I'll start and then we'll end with you. That sounds good. I think lining up, I mean, you said this before, but lining up financing, I think what a business needs is consistency. It's really hard to predict. If I decide to get a 500 megawatt contract, I have to have somebody that is willing to offtake that, but more importantly, I have to find somebody for capital market financing to fund that project. And that entire layer also impacts our ability to hire folks into our business. And so I do think that funding and also, tying that to an offtake agreement, all three layers have to be there, and we know they have to be there for 20 or 30 years in order for us to kind of build a lot of robustness in this sector. And so that's probably my 2 pennies.
The way I see it, one of the things I think that concerns me, the most is the allocation of capital. So without minerals, there's no energy, and so a lot of these projects on data centers are, I think there's for every dollar invested there's $25 to 1 on the minerals. And what I worry is that we see a similar situation like we've seen in the EV, battery industry where, $100 billion of, public and private finance goes to building out these EV battery manufacturers. But where does the materials come from? China. What's the point? There needs to be symmetry between the power and the data centers that we're creating and the minerals that we need so that we can be reliant and secure. I mean, for every data center that's built, there are 4 minerals that there's 0 U.S. or 0 non-China production. And so to answer the question a little bit more directly, I feel like the offtake being such a big part of all of this stuff, they need to start to share in the risk. Google, why are you investing $500 billion in a data center? How about putting $100 billion in securing your supply chain? It's a pretty key part of it, I think. And so, because otherwise we're at risk of just being completely shut down. And so that's education. That's kind of getting that messaging out there, because I just worry that we're going to be kind of building the infrastructure without the things that need to go into it. So
I'm going to concede one point. Without minerals, we don't have energy. So, sometimes you get thinking about your place in industry, and you might even be a little bit selfish. And I noticed that. Thank you. I recognize that. But just joking aside, we have so many challenges, and when we start looking at, do we want to win the global AI race? It's a choice, right? That's what we're facing. We have a choice as a nation, as a country, as our cities. We've seen some of these big projects and data centers recently create some upheaval and differences of opinion, and usually that comes back to not enough discourse. And so when I look at the problems that we're facing here in Utah and as a nation, whether it be in creating consistency and reliability in grids, whether it's offtake, whether it's the generation, it all comes back down to, do we have the will and the desire to do the hard things now? Which is, we have, as a nation, let certain things crumble, our manufacturing, our ability to, minerals, for goodness sakes. You just made a great case for that. Having US made and manufactured batteries, whatever it may be, this is our opportunity as a nation to come together. And I know I'm not answering the question, but that's what I think we need more than anything, is we need to have states like Utah help catalyze our different industries. How blessed we are to live in a state that has minerals accessible. We do struggle with water, but that's why we're going to be presenting options that don't consume water like old nuclear power plants do. So how do we do this? How do we win the AI race, so to speak, whatever we want to call it, whether it's a national security or a technological reason for doing that? We are capable of doing this here. And so I just want to thank World Trade Center, Zions Bank, everybody here. Theresa, you did a wonderful job, and Andre. We get to talk about this, and we get to have this mic here in front of us to talk about how Utah can make a difference in the world. And we really can, and we're going to do that. And it's great companies that will do this. And number one, the public side, the private side, the capital side, all of us need to be communicating in forums like this, and then we can actually pull this off. Because what we are talking about is branded scale, bringing in foreign manufacturing partnerships. World Trade Center's been leading out on that. We have amazing people in this state. We have the resource we need. We can figure out how to get more water into this state. I know we can do that. And so I just want everybody to know how grateful, I think, on behalf of all of us, we are for this forum. So.
Well, thank you so much. Truly an inspiring, enlightening panel. I had a great time moderating it. I can tell the audience was really engaged. So please join me in thanking our panelists.